Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. Let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. Well, hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Exponential Growth Podcast. I'm your host, David Olivencia, and I'm very excited about our guest today, somebody who I've met through Analyst Investors and have just really been taken away with his knowledge, depth of this whole new, call it social, spatial reality, tech, Metro New York, a lot of great things. Welcome to today's podcast, Max Rivera, leading global partnerships at Snap. Max, welcome.
Thank you, David. Appreciate you having me on and everything you're doing. It's awesome to see you launch this podcast. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, it's great to have you, and we're gonna cover some great ground. So, Max, let's start out and just a little bit about you. Let's start about you, your story. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. I'll share some background on my story that maybe will be new to you as well. Just to I'll kind of take it back from day one. But my story in general, David, is a story of kind of wonder. It's a story of like determination, taking blind leaps, and also some fortune, right, along with all of that. So, fortunate to be born in the family that I was born into. Two loving parents, both entrepreneurs. They broke barriers and from their own kind of background and heritage and where they came from. Two great siblings that I always looked up to, that I'm still learning from and still trying to catch. And then fortunate to be born in the country that I was born in, the country of Honduras, which is just a really vibrant, kind of colorful country. It's a land of hustlers, which I love, and again I was kind of lucky to be born into that. And that's something, that just until recently, I've been really come to understand my kind of immigrant story here in the U.S. I think it took me some years to even sit down, reflect, and see how, being born in Honduras, being born in that, and immigrating here has affected, who I am essentially, and shaped who I am. So I immigrated to this country about 17 years ago by myself, essentially. Came here to go to undergrad. And without me knowing, I was actually pursuing Ikigai, which, by the way, is something that I learned from just last year at the Angeles Summit in Chicago. I forget who it was, one of the authors that you guys had speak.
He was a great author. It was a great author. He wrote this book called Networking and Networking Excellence.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I write about it in my book, the Ikigai.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't know that concept, but essentially that's kind of what I've been pursuing without me knowing, really, right? Is more on reflection. And basically what I realized is that I love the arts and kind of the creative space, but I don't have the craft. I can't draw or do anything artistic from that perspective. I love technology. I taught myself how to code when I was in college, but I'm not that good or interested enough to be behind a screen and coding, full time. So I never pursued an engineering career. And then ever since I was young, I've always been good at sales and with people. I remember coming home in first grade with a stack of bills to my parents. I had taken some World Cup calendars from my dad's work that they had printed and sold them to my classmates in first grade, and just came back home with a bunch of money for my parents. And so I've always just had a knack for kind of selling and business in general. And that kind of led me to pursue a career in advertising, which, again, without me knowing, it's not like I had this reflection when I was, going through college. But now I realized that I was really kind of found this industry where I could, be in a creative environment. Obviously, with digital advertising, kind of pursue all the kind of technical parts of it all, but centered around business objectives and growing businesses, right? So pursued a career there that led me to New York, worked in the big advertising agencies here, met my wife going through that, who's now been, an amazing support, and have two beautiful children together that also have fueled my career. And around the time when I had my first child, my daughter, I landed in this rocket ship of a company, Snapchat, about 9 years ago at this point, 8.5 years ago. Very close to their IPO, but still very much a startup. And they were launching their advertising business, which is how the company really makes all of its money. And so they looked for somebody with an advertising background. They were launching in Latin America and needed somebody that understood that market. I understood it for the fact that I was from Honduras is as far as I understood it. I had never really, done business in Latin America or in the region.
Brazil is not, it's a whole different, Brazil, even every country has its own,
Every country,
idiosyncrasy, right?
exactly. And that's the fortune piece, right? That I think is part of a lot of Latinos' story or immigrant stories. But for me, it was also taking a leap, right? It was a startup. I had this career in advertising, and who knew what was going to be of this company? And so, as much as they were taking a leap on me, I was also taking a leap on the company. It now feels like an obvious decision, but I got to basically be the first head of Latin America for the company, launching our business through that region. Got to learn a lot about that region, obviously doing that, and then expanded that role to launch into new markets across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So did that for a few years, which was eye-opening and life-changing in many ways. And now I continue to be here at the company in this global capacity, working with our top partners and advertisers. And so it's been quite a journey, but ultimately kind of pursuing that ikigai that we're talking about, right? And like continue to be in this place where I can enjoy the creativity of a company like this and the work that we do, all the technology, but very focused on kind of business development and growing our revenues. So that's the journey in a nutshell.
Well, and two, for just the ikigai, right? It's like it's a Japanese. It's like your reason for being, and so it's like being at the center of four things. It's like doing what you love, doing what you can get paid for, doing what you're good at, and doing what the world needs. And those things change over time. What you love changes over time, what you're good at, what you can get paid for. But you see a lot of people, they do things that they can get paid for stuff, but they're miserable, right? And you see some there's you're good at something, you love it, but you can't make any money from it. So that's okay. So you want to be always at that center, and through life it changes, and it's a bit of a journey. So and it's a very important, I think, for leadership and just being happy and engaged in what you do. And you see that when you're doing it, you're in the zone, right? You're in the zone, and you're cranking away. And then we talk about, this is an Exponential Growth Podcast, and we're talking about Snap and Max's role there. But for our viewers, they, from a unicorn perspective, which is reaching $1 billion in valuation, Snap did this in 2 years. So you talk about, like, there's growth, hyper growth, and then there's exponential growth. Took off like a rocket ship, and still growing. And Max has an amazing leadership position there. So kudos, Max. And I know a lot more great things that come. We can also jump in a little bit of some of the cool tech, or at least things you can share. Maybe some things you can, maybe some things you can share. So this is exponential growth, and what we'd like to talk about are trends. Like, what are the big exponential trends that you've seen that are really shaping the future? How do you then think about that and how you invest? And then, how do you lead in an environment like this where things are, you're doing global stuff, a lot of crazy technology. So we'll touch on a bit of those. So if we look at trends, and you might have a bias view, maybe you don't, I don't know. But what do you see are the big trends that our listeners who are listening and watching this podcast, what should they have on their mind? Big tech trends.
Yeah, and you're right. Obviously, working directly in tech, there's always like a little bit of a bias, and also like a POV, right, of just like the part in which I work in tech, because tech is so broad. There's things that I know I'm not an expert in, so I hear there's a lot, obviously, in like kind of infrastructure and on the chip side of things. Not an expert in that, right? So like I'm biased also from that perspective. But I try to also wear kind of like a what I call like a Max hat and not just like a Snap hat, right? So definitely, look at the world from that perspective, especially as an investor, right? Which is how we've, connected and been introduced. And so, as an investor, I really try to not just think about, the stuff that I do at Snap, but looking at trends kind of more broadly. And the obvious answer would be AI to your question, right? But that's almost like a cheat answer. It's almost like saying water or gas or air, right? It's like everywhere. So I think, to be more specific, like When I think about the way that we do things today, like a lot of it feels archaic to me and like outdated. And maybe it's to me again because I've been in technology for so long now. But just imagining like how much time we still spend on Excel sheets, whether it's Google Sheets or Excel, like how much time we spend on spreadsheets and how long that's been happening and how that product, hasn't changed that much over a long time. And you probably spend more time in spreadsheets than I have, or have
Well,
been
that
longer
time you
in
make
them.
us wife laughing.
Yeah, yeah. Even email, right? I spend a lot of time in email. We all do. Email is a product that has not evolved. So it's gotten to this point where it's really feeling archaic. Like it's just like the same product and we're doing things the same way now for several decades, like 3 decades plus. Um, Even though there's been like amazing other technologies and it feels like we're advancing, but when you look at where you spend most of your time, it's actually the same technologies back from the 90s, right? So I do think we are going through this transitional period now and reinventing the new version of computing, to put it in kind of fancy terms. And I was thinking about this question and thinking about not saying the next version. So I'm trying to pick my words very carefully here. It's the new version of computing because a lot of people sometimes get put into these ideas of it has to replace the current. When you talk about new, it kind of makes that assumption that like, oh, we're going to put the old to rest and we're going to just live in this new world. But the reality is that there's just versions and we are living in different versions of them. So we talk about the mobile revolution and mobile era, but we didn't stop using computers, right? We use computers at work all the time. I have my laptop here. Like we use them as much as we used to before. So we don't
I
replace
prefer to use my like I can't type it. Like I mean I
yeah.
like my mobile, it's great, but I can't do hardcore typing and working on that stuff. It just
Yeah.
doesn't
No, absolutely, right? So like there's things that like you just continue to do in that form of computing, but then there's other behaviors and other use cases that the phone is great for, right? You can't call an Uber from your laptop, right? You certainly can't use like a Snapchat from your laptop as well. And so there's a lot of things that are just meant for that next version of computing. And then I think we're really building what the next, version will be. And there's no clarity yet exactly on that what that would look like. But that's what I'm really looking for in terms of next trends. And there's I think 3 areas within there that I'm really bullish, but we're yet to define what they look like. One is more specific within AI agents, but at the operating system level. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now that are like kind of independent agents. You have to go to a specific application or something, or you have to give it permissions to your email and to your things, and it doesn't talk to each other. And it's like the user experience isn't really great from what we're seeing right now. But I'm really bullish on the kind of things that Apple is doing at the OS level with Apple Intelligence. And other things that can be done, like Gemini, I think is great because it's basically in the Google operating system too, right? So I really like those kind of agents that are kind of below the surface a little bit. So those to me are really interesting. And then really interested in autonomous agents as well. Or another way to think about it too is kind of promptless AI. So this, AI wave right now, we've been introduced to prompting, right, and prompt engineering. But that's really a tax on like consumers when it comes to user experience, where you actually have to think about what you want. You have to think about how to engineer that prompt and all that. I think the future is going to be a lot more kind of promptless engineering. Like the agent knows what you want, knows how you want it. It learns a lot more. You don't need to prompt it as much, right? So really fascinated by that kind of stuff. And then lastly, and this connects a little bit to what we do here at Snap, is just completely new hardware, right? So we've been using phones for a while, we've been using computers for a while, but I do think like once you put these things together, there should be some sort of new form factor that to me the really big unlock is going to be for it to be hands free. So that means it's something that it can see, it can hear you, it can talk back to you, and it can think by itself and it can do things by itself. Beyond that, I don't know what that would look like, right? There's experiments that we're doing around glasses. You see things like AI pins that have come out and all that stuff. So there's a lot of still figuring out what that would look like. But I do think once you put all these pieces together, it means it has to be in a new form factor. It can't be in a phone and it can't be in a computer.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, really bullish and interested to see like what new hardware and kind of form factors are going to come across. So those are the big trends. I know we went there on a lot of areas, and this is the geek in me coming out, right?
Yeah,
Of me
no,
looking
and
at it from that perspective.
it's I mean it's good. I mean, you've got so many great experiences and research and what you see, and you go to conferences and you're seeing, we all come with different insights through experiences and how we shape a point of view, right? And so it's always interesting to hear that. Maybe just let's double click on this autonomous AI, right?
Yeah.
So like walk me through this scenario, right? I'm walking through New York City, which we'll both be in New York City next week. I'm walking down the street. So how would autonomous AI like guide me? What would be insightful? It's going to figure out what I want before I want it. It's conversational. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of, I think, use cases, but some of them would be, and a lot of this too, again, has to do with potentially like things just being more interoperable and talking to each other. So I think like an agent that like knows what's on your calendar, right? And when you need to leave for certain things, your preferred mode of transportation, for instance, right? And like you don't even have to tell, hey Siri, call me an Uber to go to from like the Bank of America headquarters to where my dinner is. That's already just autonomous, right? You might
Yeah.
just give it a. Of course, I triggered my my voice assistant here, but um, being able to just at least give it a confirmation and say, it can double check with you, right? And things like that. You can have some ultimate kind of decision making power. But there's a lot of things that you shouldn't be able to like prompt. You shouldn't have to go to an app and say, hey, what's the best way for me to get from Bryant Park to downtown Manhattan today? Like that kind of stuff should be very autonomous, right? It should know traffic conditions, it should know weather
Wow.
conditions, it should know all that kind of stuff, and be able to lead you there. And that's on a very simple example, but think about just from a traveling perspective, like oh, you're coming here, then your flight is the next day. There's a lot there that I think it could easily do without you having to like really prompt it.
Mhm.
You're running behind. Hey, I drafted an email already to your guest, letting them know that you're about 15 minutes behind it. You're actually 15 minutes behind. Even telling you that, you might not know, right? You're like, I think I'm 5 minutes behind, but actually there was traffic jam, and it telling you, no, I already drafted a note to your guest, to their next appointment, and letting them know that you're 15 minutes behind because you're actually 15 minutes behind. And then you saying, okay, yes, send it. That's a much better thing than me pausing and saying like, hey, draft me an email for David saying that I'm 15 minutes behind, please. No, it should already know that. It should already know that I'm
Yeah.
15 minutes behind. It should already know that this is going to David and that I like to send that over email or text. That should be like autonomous. And then I should
Got it.
just say yes or no, right?
Got it.
So
Yeah, it's
those
really
are a
cool. I
couple
mean,
of use
and there's,
cases.
like you
There's probably
said,
a lot
bunch.
more.
Yeah, and there's probably lots of different use cases, but I think it gives those listening just a taste of what's happening and what's going to cause exponential growth. And we chatted on Snap, Max. You get to what in whatever you can share. Can you just give us a little bit of just some of the breakthrough, exponential, cool things that are going on at Snap that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think, the big thing, especially talking about the future, is earlier this year, we launched a new version of our augmented reality glasses, which is an experiment. It's not a consumer kind of mass market product. It's a product right now mostly for developers and creators to think about what kind of experiences could they develop if instead of using a phone, you had computing that is through glasses. That uses voice and that uses because the glasses have cameras and it has displays, and so it can see through the world, and it can put digital things on top of the world through the displays, and through the cameras it can see your hands, and so it's a hand gesture device, and so you can make hand gestures, and it can recognize what you're doing. So we put this in the hands of developers so that they can come up with ideas and use cases. And we're seeing some really cool stuff there of them. For instance, one of the ones I was just seeing today is somebody that developed an app for you to learn how to play the piano. So you're wearing the glasses, you're looking at a real piano, and it's showing you what keys to play, for specific songs and whatnot. It can teach you how to do that. There's another one that I saw of somebody that was learning how to play pool, or needing some assistance to improve their pool game, right? Their billiards. And so you're wearing the glasses, and it can see where the ball is. It can see the hole that you're making. It can point you exactly on like hit the ball from this angle, this direction, and give you that outcome. Those are just a couple examples, but stuff that we would have never thought of, or maybe seems small enough for a company like us to maybe be doing, but we want to put it in the hands of developers so they can come up with these sort of niche use cases that are actually quite large and can be very disruptive. So that's one of the biggest kind of bets for the future that we're doing, but it's all predicated on what we do on Snapchat, the app, which is getting
Yeah.
people to communicate with each other, getting people to use augmented reality technology for different things. And so a lot of this is already happening on Snapchat. And now we're thinking about what happens when you take that technology and put it in other places and other form factors, as I was saying before. So glasses is one of them. We're also doing integrations with stadiums and arenas. And so if you go to music festivals today, or a few kind of big arenas like at the Super Bowl, a few NBA games, you're starting to see our technology and the jumbotrons and on big screens. And so, yeah, we're thinking a lot about what happens when you put this tech outside of Snapchat, the yellow app, and outside of like your phones.
Well, so what would be like what I haven't haven't been to a game in a while. Like I mean,
We'll have to go.
some games.
We'll have to go. We'll have to
Yeah,
plan
no, no,
one.
no, definitely. But like, so what happens on the jumbotron? Like, what's up, and how does it integrate, and like, what's the example?
Different examples, but you can think of like, from simple things of like how to make a funner, more cool kind of kiss cam, and you can bring kind of nice decorative things around like kiss cam or also whatnot. To for the Super Bowl, I think we did. You can wear the helmets of the different teams, and so we'll point to somebody on the audience and we'll put a virtual helmet on them. But then we've also partnered with Disney for the release of Avatar 2 last year, where we turned people around the arena into avatars from Avatar the movie.
Really cool.
So this was like a combined partnership with Disney, and they wanted to create buzz around the new film, right? And so you were at the stadium, and it all of a sudden pointed to somebody, and like their whole body turned blue, their face turned blue, like the avatar looked super realistic. And so all sorts of things there. But it's still early for us to figure out, okay, like what else? What are other really interesting use cases? And you can just imagine traditional things that are done on Jumbotron, sweepstakes, contests, little games. Like there's things that can happen there that we're still just not there yet, but I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Ah, good. No, really, really good stuff. So, thank you for that, right? And Snap, just amazing leader in the social space, and my kids use it all the time. Um, investment. So we talked a bit about trends. Let's talk about just your thoughts on investing. How do there's all these exponential curves going on, right? Spatial, AI, tech, chips, even you actually even like demographic things, right? Exponential growth in the Latino population, right? There's a lot of different trends that are going on out there. What do you how do you think about this as it relates to investing, right? What do you think? What do you recommend? How should our users, our listeners, think about it? What are your thoughts there, Max?
Yeah, the way that I like to think about this, and it's an analogy that I don't relate to because I don't do these things, but I understand it. Is I don't know if you do any rowing or surfing.
I do like the exercise rowing, but not like the outside
not
on
like canoe rowing, yeah. But from what I hear, when you're in the sea, right, when there's a lot of waves and there's a lot of kind of change, um, it helps to actually stay as like still as possible. Not completely still, right? But like it doesn't help for you to start to like rock the boat in different directions, right? It's just keep rowing in like a steady, like flat pace. And that's kind of how I like to think about times like this when it comes to investing, because there's so much going on. There's so much change, right? A company or a thesis that you might have around investing around AI, you read an article or you see an advancement or you see like, oh, ChatGPT just came out with that feature and destroyed this company that you invested in. There's so much going on that I like to just like stay steady on the basics of business. So whether you're investing in an AI infrastructure company, chip company, or in a restaurant, in a mom and pop brick and mortar restaurant, there's some fundamentals of business that don't change. I would say like some of the number stuff, right? Around profits, profitability. I mean, making money to begin with, sometimes in tech is not thought of.
So
like
some of that isn't in style, but
yeah. And I think those things like it doesn't matter if 5 years from now, instead of AI, we're talking about blockchain and other stuff, and you're still gonna think about the same things of profits and losses and basics of economics and finances that will not change. So I think getting close to those basics are even more important, I think, during these kind of crazy times. And outside of those business concepts, same thing goes, I think, for consumer and like consumer experiences, right? So you see some amazing technologies, like I think blockchain again and crypto have been very good examples of super promising tech with terrible user experience, right? It's like, oh yeah, this is super promising. I get it. Like there's going to be a lot of potential. You cannot expect you're going to, have a big business, big company, big product that needs people to, go through 3 hoops just to even log into the platform and do any sort of activity, right? Or like a terrible user experience and for the thing to break. And so there's, I think, some basics of just like consumers like simplicity, you like the surprise and delight, like you need to give utility to people. There's some basics there around just like what makes a good product, that whether again you're talking about chips or you're talking about making a delicious pastry at a restaurant, that are like consumer truth or human truths that remain constant. So I try to keep those 2 concepts, as steady as possible when I evaluate companies through periods like these, that like, you can kind of evaluate that. I think for the third thing is on the jockey, if you will, or on the founders and the people running these businesses. Some again consumer or like personal traits, human traits in them that can withstand changes and things that will come, because it's so hard to predict what's going to happen, right? To that company, to the macro, to the tech. But it's good to maybe identify the skill sets on the person that like no matter what's thrown at them, and they'll be able to handle, to pivot, to reinvent, or do whatever. Like, and so I look at those 3 factors, like very basics of business. What are the product features? Make sure that those make sense. And then do they have the right people behind that business that like regardless of what's going to happen, are they going to be able to push through it? Those are the 3 things that I try to keep, but it's not a perfect formula. I mean, obviously, if not, we'd all be super successful investors, right? But like, those are the 3 that I like to think about.
No, those are good ones. And the team one made me think about, or not the team, the jockey, right? I've invested in a lot of companies, and there's these ones that stand out. They're in the top whatever 10, 20% of my portfolio. And what I find is that it goes exactly to your point. COVID hits, Silicon Valley Bank hits. They're all these different new technologies are always coming, ways to do things, right? And these founders, they I think it's you anticipate, right? You're already getting senses and you're anticipating, but then you get this bias for action, and then you're able to take action and pivot the right way at the right time. And it's not easy. It's not, startups are, and I'm talking about startups, but really any company. I mean, it's startups, but also big companies. And big companies had to, they take their leadership and they pivot. But that's such a key point. Now, double clicking there was, well, how do you, if you're doing it at a more mature company, you've seen the leader in action for a long, long time. But at a startup, it's like, how do you know what are those ingredients that when things, hit, that does this startup founder gonna be able to, adapt and whatnot. That's where I think the art and the reps come in, but it's not easy. It's not easy to find those all the time, right?
It's definitely tough to judge, and like sometimes you go off of resumes, but that's not perfect sometimes, right? Like I think it's attractive sometimes to a founder that you say, oh, worked at Google, worked at Facebook or whatnot. That's a very different business and type of company and responsibilities that you have in running a startup and starting something, right? Great companies and great backgrounds, but it's tempting sometimes to just like want to back a founder or a founding team because they have this amazing pedigree resume at like, leading tech companies, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the right skill sets to build a company. And so I think like looking for these other things are helpful. Like I know we both have a passion for investing in underrepresented founders and Latino founders specifically, but kind of underrepresented in general. And you see a lot of data backing this, right? Like women, immigrants, they tend to be sometimes like one of the best performing founders. And it's not because they went to Google or Facebook or these type of companies, but actually because like they had other maybe hardships, or they had to juggle multiple things at times. Again, talking about women specifically, right? If they're especially moms, right? Like I think moms make amazing entrepreneurs. There's all these factors that I think you can look up for that are beyond just like what is your business experience, that tells you maybe a lot more about, are they going to be able to go through tough times? Are they going to be able to change, to pivot, to grow, to go through the different phases? So I try to find those. Yeah. And I didn't start like this. I'm a very much, as you could tell from the beginning of this conversation, I love thinking about the future and the vision and the dream. So I started in investing a lot with that angle, and then realized that like maybe like looking at the past is probably maybe more indicative, because the future is just like you're just dreaming, right? And there's founders that will sell you a perfect dream and an amazing vision, right? But then I focus like, well, tell me about the past, because there's no deliberating there. Like that is we knew what happened, right? So tell me what
Exactly.
happened in the past, and I tend to like find that sometimes even more insightful than a founder that paints a nice future, because everyone does that, right? Everyone wants to paint like,
Oh,
oh yeah, the numbers are just going to go this way and the market
yeah.
is going to go up, and if we go from 20% growth to 30% growth, then we're going to hit this ARR. It's like, okay, great, yeah, like, but that's all just in the future. So
Yeah, it's like I was like, okay, oh, well, hey, show me the data. Okay, how's it go? Great. Well, what have you done? Show me
yeah,
the, it's like it goes from the theoretical to the analytical, right? Kind of
yeah,
show the data. Um, well, Max, you got a amazing track record. As you kind of just think about your ikigai and where you see the next couple years going, what's Max aspire to and want to be? Would love to hear your thoughts there.
yeah. I'm really passionate about supporting early stage entrepreneurs. I think, yeah, I realized that that's the stage in companies that gets me really excited. And instead of having to bet all in or put all of my time and all of my focus in one, I'm really enjoying the venture space for that reason, and doing advisory and other forms of kind of investing in my time and my expertise on early stage companies. Not only do I get to learn about, sorry, not only do I get to back and kind of hopefully support some really great entrepreneurs, but then I also get to learn
Yeah.
about their journeys and about what's the latest and the tech kind of frontiers. And so I see it as investing in myself as well. So at least for the near term, a lot of focus there for my own personal time, and just trying to balance in the time that I am right now in my career with also investing in my own personal side of things, and being able to spend time with my kids and my family and being healthy overall myself. Like, I see that as such an important thing that I think earlier in my career I didn't value as much, especially when it came to my own time and taking care of my own self. That I'm trying to find this balance of being able to do that for others, but also for myself. So trying to balance that, be in a place where I can balance those things and continue to grow.
Yeah, the my daughter, I was just at a sorority daddy sorority thing, and I was there with her, and we're celebrating and we're having a good time, and I could very easily look back to when she was 2, 3 years old, and just and it goes by fast, and everybody says that, but it does. And then on the health side, it's at least in my case, now I'm really, whatever, 5-ish days a week. But there was a time, you get so busy with work and you're cranking. And, I was maybe 3 days a week doing a little something, but not even the little bit wasn't really that good. And then hindsight, I think that's just, and then by the way, there's the mental health and then there's a physical. I mean, all these things
Right.
come into play. And so I like the way you're kind of thinking about that, Max, and appreciate you sharing
Yeah.
those thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that the learning for me has been like there's always this temptation to think about like it takes time away from work or from things you can be doing professionally or socially. Again, whether this means like spending time on your own self-care or with family, or taking care of others. But it actually has just made me such a much better investor, a better operator, a better employee, better leader. You just kind of need that in order, right? Like, there's no way you can perform at your highest level if like your house is not in order, your literal house is not in order, right? So I think it is worth taking an extra hour in the day sometimes for whether it's working out or eating better or some time with the kids or doing something there that then like it is going to pay dividends then in how you show up at work and in your work. So that's what I'm balancing now, is just like making sure that like I take that fuel from those things and pour that back into the work essentially.
Ah, you got it. So, well, Max, thanks for sharing all those insights, thoughts, perspectives. How do these listeners get connected with you, stay connected with you on social?
Yeah, so I like to joke, but I believe it, that my most personal social media is actually LinkedIn. That's where you'll get to find the most personal things about me, like where I work and things that I'm interested in. All the others don't have any of that. So LinkedIn would be the best. That's where you can follow the work that I'm doing, things that I'm interested in, and the best place to connect if you want to reach out. And there, happy to connect there. So yeah, that's my preferred social media of choice, which tells you how much of a geek and work obsessed I am.
Excellent. Well, again, Max, thanks. We'll see you next week in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to it.